This is, I think, the 10th of our district training assembly classes tonight, and probably one of the most important in our district, youth protection training. Matt Smith is our youth protection officer for the district, and he's going to be sharing with us tonight not only how to protect the youth, which is extremely important since we're involved with our pride camps, rally camps, interact, youth exchange, early act. Everything we do with youth is about protecting youth, and it's very important. We surely want to be protective of our youth out there and make sure of that. But secondly, we need to protect ourselves as Rotarians, that we're doing the right thing every day, and making sure that that we're doing things to protect ourselves and our Rotary clubs and the Rotary name. And so that's extremely important. And Matt's going to share all that with us tonight. One of the things I'd like you to do right now is to go down to the bottom of the screen there. You'll see a little chat bubble. And click on that and type in your name and your Rotary club so we can keep track of who went through this training with Matt this evening. And so with that, Matt, please take it away, sir.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I greatly appreciate it. A little bit more about myself. I am with the Temecula New Generations Rotary Club down here in Temecula, and our incoming president, Carissa, is on the line as well. So hello, Carissa. Everybody that is attending, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to be here. I have been a Rotarian for 10 years now, and I've been serving in this position for over 4 years. So I take it very seriously. We are not interacting with the youth in person as much as we once were, but we hopefully will start interacting more, either with Interact, Early Act, and Rotaract. And then also hopefully we can get back to doing camps and being one-on-one with the kids as well. But that being said, we're also going to be online. Zoom meetings are now one of the new things that people are doing. So you want to make sure that we take everything that we learned today and apply it online as well. So without further ado, we're going to go into a slideshow. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and then at the end we will field all the questions. Hopefully as we go, we might answer those questions along the way. So one thing that we will cover, but I will cover right now on our side of it, is Rudy did mention that we are recording this. So I want to make sure that everybody knows we are recording this. Whenever you do anything online and or in the media, social media, anything that you're going to be printing, you want to make sure that everyone acknowledges that they know you're going to be using their picture and or their voice or comments that they make to either, if you're going to use it for publicity or use it in an article in the newspaper, you want to make sure you get everyone's permission to do so. So if at any point you guys do not want to be on video, please feel free to turn your video off. But we are recording this and people may view it at a later date. So that's just our disclaimer there to start. So, all right, so let's see if we can get this to work. All right, can you guys see the presenter view or can you see the regular slideshow view?
Looks like presenter view to me, but
yeah, you're in presenter view.
Is that you there, Matt, standing?
yeah, you're under arrest.
Yeah, that's me.
Put your hands behind your back and don't resist, please.
I know.
Is John Fabio still around?
Click on slideshow and then from the beginning there.
I know, but I can't see the slide, so show things.
I can along the top there. You've got home, insert, design. Whoop.
Oh, right there. Yeah, but this toolbar. Let me see if I can move this toolbar. There you go.
There you go. Click on that and then from the beginning. There you go. Perfect.
It still plays this way.
Oh, wow. That's okay. Go ahead.
No, we'll change it. All right, now what do you see?
I see the slide with the ones on the left-hand side you're just going to go to.
Yeah, push that.
But push from beginning. There you go.
I push it, nothing happened.
Just go through the slides. Well, we can see it. Go ahead.
Well, if that's the case, we'll go back to presenter view. Hold on a second.
Should have an icon on the bottom of your screen that will get you onto the regular presentation.
Try again. Hey.
That's good.
All right. So do you see just the main screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
We're on common questions.
All right. So, a couple things we're going to go over. There's going to be several different sections, and we'll summarize those as we go. So, like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat at the bottom of the screen. So, a couple common questions that I get all the time from when I'm speaking or when I'm at different events. A lot of people want to know if I was live scan with another agency, school, or city. Hold on, let me get this out of the way. Or nonprofit, do I have to get live scanned again? And so the answer to that is yes. You have to get live scanned with each individual agency that you are going to be volunteering with. And the reason that is because your name gets a number associated with it through the Department of Justice. And then when something happens in accordance with your name and your social security number, then each agency gets reported to. And so, for instance, if you used to be a teacher and you were live scanned with them and you have since retired or you're no longer working with them, then they would no longer want to track anything that happens with you because it's no longer pertinent to their system. So same thing with Rotary. If you are in a different district in a different state, or even in the same state but different district, they're going to want to track you through live scan. But then once you leave their district, it's not that they don't care about you, but they're no longer interested if anything happens because you have now moved on. So hopefully,
Hey, Matt.
yes. So hopefully they'll clean their records and then they will take your name off of their interested list. And then you'll only be reported to the people that you are currently working with and active with. So a lot of people say, oh, I've been live scanned 10 different times. Well, it's because you're with different organizations along the way. And so you can't share your live scan number with other people. It has to be done individually for that district or agency that is interested in tracking you. So the other question I get is, how long does my live scan last? So in our district, and the way the live scan works is you will be tracked and reported on as long as that agency does not send in a letter saying they're no longer interested in your information. So if you were live scanned 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it should still be on file with our district as long as you have not left and then come back. So how can I get the proper form to be live scanned? Just email me. Let me know you're interested in being live scanned or you have people that are interested in being live scanned, and then I can email you the form. That's the easiest way. You can send it to them. It's a PDF. They can print it out. It has our information on the top of it. And then from there, they can take it to the agency and whoever's going to live scan them will know what to do with it. So what is the billing number for the district? I get this sometimes. People will take it places and they'll ask what the billing number is for the district. We are a 501c3. And so LiveScan, the Department of Justice, does not charge our district for doing live scans. And so that being said, the only fee that goes along with being live scanned is the fee that the person is charging to do the process. So if you go to the police department, they're going to charge a fee to do the process. If you go to Postal Annex. They're going to charge a fee to do the process. And so that being said, it varies depending on where you go. So I recommend you shop around and you ask what the fee is and what they charge you. At one point in time, there were several people in the district that were going around doing mobile live scans, and they would charge $15 or $20 a person because they could do 6 or 8 or 10 at the same time. That is coming back from what I've heard. So if that's an option, if you guys are going back into a meeting spot and you could gather up a fair amount of people that are interested, I think sometimes they require 5 people minimum to come out just so it makes it worth their time. But I have several different phone numbers that are willing to travel. And then for those of you that knew Adria Poindexter down in the Temecula, Murrieta area, she has moved to Arizona. And so if you plan on using her, she's no longer available. Word on the street is she did train somebody to replace her, and that person just passed their license. And so they are available. So I'm in the process of getting that information, so I have it to share with you guys. So then the next question always comes, well, who pays for the live scan? And so that is different for every single club. And so that being said, I'm with the Temecula New Gen Rotary Club. At one point in time, our club didn't have a whole lot of money. And so we asked the volunteer to pay to be live scanned. I do know that some clubs offer to reimburse people for being live scanned, and or when they have the person come to the club, they don't charge the person. The club just pays that person a check for all the people that have been live scanned. So there's several different ways to do it, but I highly recommend you discuss it with your club, either the treasurer or the president, and that you guys all make sure that you're on the same page if you're going to go get live scanned. Because I've seen people show up to get live scanned and then they end up paying like $85, and they ended up going to an assisted living facility and getting it done there, and the people charged a lot of money. And so the club wasn't prepared to pay $85. They were used to paying $20, $25, or $30. So I recommend just discussing it with them so then you know. One other thing I do want to mention about the live scan process is live scan is actually not the process itself. Live scan is the name of a company. So what live scan actually is the background check through the Department of Justice. And so every entity does it a little bit differently. And so there's several different ways that you can do background checks and several different depths of background checks. So the way that we prefer to do it is our live scan process that we use. It's called live scan. We'll live scan somebody and it'll go back through the previous history, but it only looks for major crimes and anything that involves children. And so petty crimes don't necessarily show up on your list, depending on where they're at in the process. And then it all depends on whether the agency has included it in the database. So it has to be up to date as well. So it's not 100% perfect system. And the reason I tell you that is because I want to be transparent and let everybody know it's not going to say, if somebody had 3 DUIs 45 years ago, it's not going to show up in their, on the live scan because they've done that according to the Department of Justice. After 10 years, it comes off your record, X, Y, and Z. And so it doesn't hurt to have it done again and or do a different kind of background check. We do a different background check for people that are host families to try to protect the families and to protect the youth. But the general live scan that we do for people for Rotary is not as in-depth as the live scan process that we currently do. So that being said, a couple of facts. Let's see if this will change slides. Did it change slides for you guys?
No.
What the heck is going on? Let me.
Matt, could I make a comment real fast?
Sure.
Okay, I would just wanted to comment that if you're doing Interact and you're doing it at the high school level or in any school, you're gonna have to be live scanned through the school as well, besides being Rotary.
Got it.
Thanks, Charles.
Hey, Rudy.
There we go.
All right. So a couple of things. These are some facts that I want to make sure that everybody understands. Our district does have a youth protection policy, and I'm happy to share that and come and talk to your club or individuals if you guys have a youth protection committee, I'm more than happy to come out and share that with you guys. In regards to the LifeScan forms, I have all the LifeScan forms in my possession, and they are under lock and key in a cabinet at my house. There is an electronic file that they have started through the Department of Justice, and it has a 2-stage verification to enter and get access. But I also have the digital files here in my possession. And so nobody else sees them, not even my wife. A lot of you guys know my wife, she's a Rotarian as well. But she doesn't need to see it. There's personal information on there, meaning not only your name, address, social security number, things of that, date of birth. Some people don't want that being shared. But then also anything that is on there possibly, it's none of her business. And so I just make sure that they're safe and under lock and key. We talked about if you were LifeScan with our district and never left, your LifeScan should be on file. So if you want to know if you have a LifeScan on file with us, you can always email me. My email is there at youthprotectionofficer@gmail.com. And then if you want to know if your club, who in your club has been LifeScan, you can send me an email, and I'll either use the DAC-DB roster if it's up to date, or you can send me a current roster, and then I can do a search based on that. All right, so a couple things we're going to talk about. Club and district policies and procedures should cover a volunteer application. This is something that you guys want to make sure get in the habit of doing. A lot of clubs, I don't think, do volunteer applications, and then a little screening process. The reason that this helps is obviously then you know who you are actually inviting to be volunteers with you, and then you have their information if anything does happen, and or it kind of tends to be if somebody has a background or a history, they don't necessarily like giving out their name and phone number and information if you're asking them to volunteer and they have a background. So sometimes it discourages people that don't have the right intentions to volunteer. So that never hurts either. We recommend that you have a volunteer job description and a list of the responsibilities and what you expect from those volunteers. That goes for a couple different things, a couple different reasons. One, hopefully you guys don't have to babysit as much later on when they're volunteering because they understand what the expectation is for them. But then you also give them a precise job duties and what you expect from them. And then they're not going to be off deviating and doing other things that is not what you really wanted them to be doing. And then try to stick with standards of ratios of adults to minors. This is one big thing that's big, for us as Rotarians, putting ourselves around the youth. And it's really hard sometimes because, you have Interact that has 50, 60, 70 kids, and you only have so many members of your club that are willing to go and participate with Interact. But the bigger the smaller the ratio you can make it, meaning 1 to 10 would be ideal, 1 adult to 10 minors. Then you kind of can keep an eye on everybody, both adults and youth, and make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing, having a good time, enjoying themselves, doing Rotary things, but not getting themselves into any kind of mischief or trouble. We recommend having a crisis management procedure. I know that that's not something that everyone always thinks of, but we recommend that you sit down and talk about it, maybe as a board or as a committee, or maybe your youth chairs all sit down and talk about it and say, hey, if something does happen, what's the plan? We need to have a plan in place now, just in case something does happen, then we're ready for it and we're not scrambling. When you're scrambling, people start making statements and comments and doing things that aren't necessarily beneficial to the club and or the member and or the district and or to the youth. And so you want to make sure that you have that in the back of your mind and you guys have discussed it and you're ready to go with a crisis management procedure. That also includes medical emergencies. So you guys want to make sure you always have first aid kits. You always know where the closest hospital is or the closest ER or anything of that nature, just in case something happens. It doesn't take long to figure that out. If you say, hey, we're having an Interact assembly here at this school, let's say Beaumont Cherry Valley High School. Okay, where's the closest medical emergency place? Where's the closest fire station? Where's the closest, who are we going to call if something happens? Just so you guys know, you have that in the back of your mind. And so if something does happen, you're not panicked and going, oh, I don't know where to go. And then you drive around in circles and you guys can't help each other. And then written guidelines consistent with the Rotary policies on reporting and following up on allegations of an incident if something does happen. And so we're going to cover some of those reporting guidelines and what to do and what not to do when you're taking a statement if something does happen. So they're just preventative measures that you can take to make sure that you're protecting yourself as well as your club, as well as the district, and as well as the youth. Because ultimately we want to have a good time, but at the same time we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and we're protecting the kids.
And Matt, Marilyn had a question about, do you have an example of a volunteer application?
I do, yes. So if anybody wants volunteer application, then please email me. I'll be happy to send it over in a PDF format. Again, it's youthprotectionofficer@gmail.com. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in this course, we'll explain Rotary's definitions of abuse and harassment. So it's one thing we want to make sure we avoid here. Talk about how to recognize and address signs of both, and discuss the roles and responsibilities of the clubs and the district leaders, right? So everybody has a role to play, and we want to make sure that everyone's playing the role properly and playing it full out, making sure that they're covering their bases. Unfortunately, no organization, not even Rotary, is immune to the risks in youth safety. When we talk about it openly, about how these issues affect our programs and communities, we reaffirm our commitment to creating a safe and inclusive environment for all, especially young people. So those of you that have been in Rotary a really long time, or even short amount of time, you may have come across different stories and different events around the world, because there are a lot of Rotarians, of scrupulous things that have happened. It's not ever, fun for us to talk about those, but we really do need to talk about them and understand what happened and how we can always be better, right? So the adage is, it's not the problem, it's how you solve it or how you react to it that is what you're going to be judged by. So, obviously we don't want to cover things up. We want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and doing it correctly. And so some of this that we're talking about tonight is going to be preventative measures, and as far as I'm concerned, preventative maintenance. That's what we're all here for. We're here to make sure that we understand, things to look for, or even if we understand and we know this stuff, just going over it and talking about it brings it top of mind. And so then it's always top of mind, and we may do things and go, oh, you know what, I probably shouldn't do that, especially based on what we just talked about. It's not good for me, for example, to ride with an individual one-on-one, youth to adult, and especially without permission and everybody being aware of it. You don't want to make mistakes and or be haphazard in your decision making that could lead to a problem later on. Unfortunately, with the way that social media is nowadays, and with the way things can get blown out of proportion, every single person, you always have to imagine that you're being recorded. That's what I tell people. Just imagine you're always being recorded, because you never know who's recording, and you don't want to be in a compromised position and or be doing something wrong, because if you imagine everyone's always being recording, you're going to be on your best behavior, and that's what I recommend. So everyone must follow the Rotary's youth protection policies. I also have a full there's a full PDF I have from RI actually on youth protection policies, and it covers a lot of the same stuff we're covering here. So Rotary's policies are designed to prevent and respond to abuse and harassment, and to manage risk across every country and culture. So that's something you have to remember. Everyone has a different culture. Everyone was raised differently. Everybody has a different home environment. And so not everyone's the same. So you may think that something's not a big deal. And so you may say something or act a certain way, touch somebody a certain way, and it's perfectly fine, or it perfectly was fine in your household, amongst your family members and siblings and friends, but maybe in their culture it's not. So it's something you always have to be very sensitive to. And then all clubs and districts are required to follow the different abuse and harassment management risks that we're going to talk about. So that means not only keeping the environment physically safe, but also promoting effective risk management procedures, cooperative volunteer attitudes, and an ethical organizational culture. And so another thing too is not just physical, but verbal. We want to make sure that we always watch what we say, and we pick and choose our words wisely, because we don't want to offend anybody, and or we don't want that to come back to hurt us later on. What we need to do to protect the youth and ourselves for activities that involve overnight stays or travel. I know that this isn't something that we're doing a ton of right now, but I really hope we get back to it soon. But always make sure you obtain written permission in advance from adults, from the parents or guardians of all participants, right? So if somebody's going to RILA, somebody's going to Pride, we have forms that they fill out. Everybody knows about it ahead of time. There's rules, regulations that everyone agrees to. And then if you've ever been involved in the RILA or Pride camps, you know that we have a statement in there saying if your child does not behave according to the rules, then you will be called to come and pick them up off of the mountain. And so no matter what time it is, you don't, as a parent, I'm sure don't want to get that call where you need to drive up and come and pick up your child because they weren't behaving. You also want to give parents or the legal guardians before the departure full details about the trip or the activity, including travel itineraries, sleeping accommodations, and the contact information of program organizers. So that being said, this is one thing that we harp on a little bit because we highly recommend you talk to the parent or guardian yourself. Get their email address, get their phone number, whatever the best communication is, but you do it yourself. Unfortunately, we don't like to rely on the kids to give it to their parents because then you now have a weak link. And when the parent says, I never received it, you legally cannot say, well, I gave it to the child to give to them. Because at that point, the child is underage and they're not responsible as far as you can't hold them liable if they're underage. And so I recommend emailing it to them. And then we're going to get into some other electronic tips and tricks, but I recommend emailing it to them and CCing as many people as possible. And the reason for that is because then everybody's getting the same email. Everybody knows exactly what's being said. And then it's not just a he said, she said situation. It can now be hey, it was a group conversation. Other people responded. They received it. And so if you don't get a response back, I recommend following up with a phone call or a text message, whichever one works best for them. But you want to get a confirmation that they received it so that if something does happen later on, they have the information that they need and you provided it to them. So then you're covering your bases. So require the parent or legal guardian of each minor, if they're traveling further away than 150 miles, to provide travel insurance for the minor. So this really comes into play for us when we have exchange students. And so we have Dick Shaw, who is in charge of the youth exchange for us, and he does a great job, has plenty of protocols and policies in place to cover that. But if you get into a situation where kids are traveling further than 150 miles away, the parents or the guardians need to provide travel insurance for the minor. Okay. So let's talk about responsibilities. So clubs and districts have different responsibilities. So let's talk about at the club level. So a club leader's responsibility at the club level, the club president. So if you're president of your club or you're going to be president of your club or you're the youth protection person, your president actually has the overall responsibility of operating and coordinating the club's youth activities with the support of the club's committee members. But as a president, we don't like you to say, oh, that's not under my purview. I have somebody for that. And so that person's in charge. Ultimately, as a president, you're the head honcho. You're in charge of overall everything that your club does. And so we make sure that we try to inform all the presidents to be up to date on these policies as well, and not just the club youth protection officer or youth services chair. So club leaders must know all the Rotary and district youth protection policies, provide required training, and screen volunteers and implement a risk management strategy. So they must coordinate with the district chairs and the district governor to address and report any allegations of abuse and harassment and implement the safeguards that are necessary to protect the youth people. So at the club level, that's what we like to see. We would like to see from you guys at the club level. So from the district chair side of it, so I would be considered a district chair for the youth protection officer side of it. So we're coordinating our efforts to raise awareness of youth safety issues and work together to develop and implement youth protection policies and ensure that all clubs follow them. So I am here for any support you guys may need. If you're having an event and you want to go over with me different policies you guys are putting in place, how you guys are going about handling the youth and the interaction with the adults. I'm here to help and provide any consultation I can and any recommendations, any forums I can provide for you, please just let me know. So just like the club leaders, my goal is to assist with training, screening procedures, and risk management, coordinate with other district chairs and district governors to address and report any allegations of abuse and harassment, and keep the district governor informed about youth program activities. They also maintain confidential records of anyone who is prohibited from participating in Rotary activities or whose membership was terminated because of incident of abuse or harassment. So just to clarify that up a little bit on the backside of that. So if we have anybody that is prohibited from participating in Rotary activities, it will be made aware to you at the beginning of your presidency. And if you're a youth protection person, most of the time I've always talked to those people in the individual clubs. Somebody that would be not able to participate in Rotary activities would be somebody that has a history of people that have made allegations, but that were not investigated by police, or that were actually cleared by police, and so nothing came of it. No charges were filed against them, and so we can't necessarily kick them out, depending on what it is, from Rotary, but we can definitely limit them and not allow them to work with the youth. If somebody does have allegations against them and they're pending, then we ask them not to participate in any youth activities. And if charges do come against them for any reason, then we can and will ask them to leave the district. So unfortunately, that has happened in the past. But I will say that the several that I have dealt with, they've actually removed themselves from Rotary altogether. When something happened, it came down, allegations were made, and they resigned from Rotary. Instead of being asked to leave, they resigned. And so we haven't had to deal with that. They've gone away without us having to necessarily force them out. But again, we're not immune to it at the Rotary level. So at the district level, the governor ultimately holds responsibility. Like I said, with the presidents in the club, the presidents oversee the club, so they're in charge of the club. Our district governor oversees our district, and so ultimately he has the control. At this point, it's a he has control over and the supervision of the district programs, including all youth programs and activities. Given the sensitive nature of the youth programs, we encourage governors to use the period between being nominated and taking office to learn as much as possible about their district youth programs. So governors always must ensure that the district has and enforces a youth protection policy that complies with Rotary's policies, and all policies are reviewed by local legal professionals. So governors should also appoint a youth program district chair who are knowledgeable about and committed to protecting youth people. So just like the other responsibilities, the governor must promptly and fully address any allegations of abuse or harassment within the district. That may include taking over the administrative of the youth programs themselves if they were previously delegated to another club or district officer. They must also closely review any allegations of abuse, harassment, or other inappropriate behavior that might disqualify a member from working with with the young people, even if it does not directly involve youth. So that being said, the governor has the ability to trump all. So if for some reason they want to overtake a program, let's say you're in charge of Pride or you're in charge of RILA, and he thinks that he needs the oversight of it with this particular situation, then they have that purview. So just keep that in mind. That's how the district views the roles that each one of us play. Ultimately, it's a team effort, and we want to make sure that we protect the youth and ourselves when it comes down to the policies and procedures. Let's talk about what is considered abuse and harassment. So some people may say, oh, well, I'm not sure exactly what, what's the difference, let's say, between sexual abuse and sexual harassment. So sexual abuse can be defined as engaging in or arranging implicit or explicit sexual acts, whether they're performed alone or with another person of any age or gender, through force or coercion, or anyone who cannot consent. So you have to remember, youth under 18 cannot consent. They may say yes, but that legally will not hold up in court. So underage minors cannot consent. Okay. So sexual harassment, a little bit different, can be defined as sexual advances, requests for sexual acts, or verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that is unwanted or directed at someone who is unwilling or unable to consent. So again, that consent word comes up, and any minor under the age of 18 cannot consent. So they could be what you consider willing, but the age factor trumps all, and they cannot consent no matter what. So it can be considered abuse, it can be considered harassment, and you can go to jail for it. So make sure not only you, but other people around you, make sure you're watching out for all different kinds of abuse. So sexual abuse and harassment include, but are not limited to, sexual assault. So making illegal, unwanted sexual contact. It takes many different forms. Coercion, using fear, humiliation, verbal assault, or threats to control behavior of another person. Stalking, indecent exposure, degrading sexual imagery, voyeurism, cyber harassment. And cyber harassment, we'll stop on that one because that's a big deal nowadays with people sending pictures, lewd pictures, text messages, even GIFs or any kind of videos, maybe even a cartoon or anime. All of that can be considered cyber harassment. And so if you see it or you hopefully are not participating in it, it can definitely get you in trouble, and it is considered sexual harassment. Trafficking and sexual exploitation. This is something that I know we've talked about a lot locally, and Dan's in the process of putting together a global grant for it. So using someone for profit, labor, sexual gratification, or some other personal advantage or gain. So a lot of times people think that trafficking is only sexual in nature. It's not. It's definitely also for labor. And then a lot of people think, oh, sex trafficking or sex exploitation are only for females. That's not the case either. It happens with men as well. So you don't want to fall into these stereotypes, and you don't want to pigeonhole yourself in your thinking. You want to make sure that you're open-minded and that you realize all of these things, even innocently, could be considered sexual abuse or harassment taken the wrong way. So other things, obviously, other types of abuse or harassment include physical abuse, physical harassment, psychological abuse. This is another thing with cyberbullying that is just rampant, and it just breaks my heart when you see these kids that are getting cyberbullied and they're getting picked on online, and it's all psychological. It's just beating them down, and then unfortunately, sometimes it leads to suicide, and that is just not acceptable. So psychological abuse is one of those things I think is highly underrated as far as what people think psychological abuse is, but everybody's different, and you have to remember that. And so people have different things that trigger them, and people have different events in their life that they've experienced that you might not have experienced. And so you have to be real sensitive to what is going to be psychologically devastating to them, even though it might not be psychologically devastating to you. And then you have verbal abuse that goes along with the psychological side of it. Definitely verbal can hurt. It can leave scars, and unfortunately it can lead to people, doing bad things because of, something that you thought might have been a joke wasn't really a joke to them. And then bullying and cyberbullying, these kind of all wrap in, they all kind of tie together, but all of these can be done, not necessarily in person. It's not, like the good old days back in the day when you would have a fight on the playground and everything would be, over after that. Nowadays, there's so much going on online. There's so many different forms of social media, so many different forms and platforms on the internet. And it just, unfortunately, you have access to people 24/7, and it's not just, oh, I'm afraid to see them at recess. It can go a lot further than that. There's kids that don't go to school because they're afraid to get bullied. There's kids that drop out of school. There's kids that act out at home. There's kids that act out at school. And it's not, let's back up a little bit. It's not just for kids. It happens to us as adults too. And so you gotta be real careful and think about what you say, and think about what you post online, and think about what you may think is funny might actually hurt somebody else, and can affect them. It can affect them short term. It can affect them long term. And that's not cool. You know, that's not something that you want to be part of. And that's not the Rotary way. So you don't want to promote that. And then discrimination. Discrimination is another one that's a big topic nowadays. Seems like it's, you know, over the last couple decades, it's been more and more of an issue. And I think it has a lot to do with the internet. I think it has a lot to do with the news. I think it has a lot to do with the way that things are portrayed, you know, around the world, in magazines and newspapers, on social media. It's just a lot of people have different cultural backgrounds. A lot of people have different sensitivities. And so these are just things that you don't need to necessarily engage in, as far as I'm concerned. And it doesn't need to be part of the topic. And then neglect. A lot of people don't realize that neglect is a form of abuse, but you can actually, as an adult, go to jail for neglecting your children, and CPS will be called. And if you neglect to feed them, if you neglect to bathe them, if you neglect to pay attention to them, then that is actually a form of abuse as well. So you can also do that same thing, hopefully not on the same level, but with kids in your Interact group. If you neglect to get them involved, or you purposely don't get them involved, that can be viewed as neglect, and it could also hurt people's feelings. And so you want to make sure that you're sensitive to that as well. So recognizing different signs of abuse and abusive behavior, there's a lot of different things that can happen. So the signs of abuse or harassment are not always easy to recognize. Often young people tell you that something is wrong only through changes in their behavior, not through their words. What seems like typical adolescent behavior or a young person being difficult could indicate that they're being abused, either by an adult or by a peer. So physical changes, anxiety or depression or withdrawal, delinquency or age inappropriate behavior, aggression. So people, you know, think, oh, somebody's aggressive and, you know, that's just how this person is. Well, maybe they're actually acting out about something else. And so you actually need to dig a little bit deeper and get to the root, you know, the root of the problem, and talk to them about it. This is where I think everything comes back to making sure that you verbalize it and you talk about it, so that everyone's on the same page, and that you make it, you know, available for them to discuss their feelings and what's going on with them. So recognizing inappropriate or abusive behaviors, everyone needs to understand the difference between appropriate and inappropriate interactions. This will help you recognize behaviors that might indicate intent of abuse of a child. A shared understanding of what's appropriate and what's inappropriate may prevent abuse, and it may even prevent false allegations. So that's one thing we want to make sure that we're, you know, always cognizant of as well. Again, with people everyone having a phone and everyone having technically a camera and or a video camera, you know, you're always under that public eye, and you don't want false allegations to come out. So a typical abuser cannot be identified by age, economic status, community standing, race, gender, or intelligence. Abusers can be people you know as well. They can be respected members of the community who use their status to manipulate others and protect themselves from accusations. Young people are often abused or harassed by people they know or people in positions of authority. So it's important to recognize and immediately address any inappropriate behaviors you see in adults who have contact with youth. So physical interactions, acceptable physical interactions, if culturally appropriate and with consent. That's a big part there, and with consent. If you're going to hug somebody, we recommend you hug them from the side. So one shoulder, pat them on the shoulder or on the back. We recommend, you know, don't rub somebody's back. That never, you know, doesn't always go over well. And my big thing with that is I recommend that you let the youth console each other. It's not our job to be there to be the one that hugs them and holds them. If something happens, that can be definitely misconstrued. Let them console each other. They all are passionate individuals, and they have a side to them that, you know, they'll want to care for others. So let them, you know, care for each other first. If they want to come over and give you a hug, give them a side hug. I don't recommend doing 2-arm hugs, and obviously you don't want it to last very long. You don't want it to be awkward, and you don't want it to be all the time. I do not recommend that. It is appropriate to shake hands, definitely. Fist bumps, you know, things like that, things of that nature. Small gestures are for approval. such as a hand gesture or clapping of the hands, are definitely appropriate as long as it's with consent. Unacceptable physical interactions with or without consent, that's the big part there, because remember, youth, no matter what if they're under 18, no matter what their age, they cannot consent. And so, like I talked about, hugging with a full body contact, not appropriate. Kissing on the lips, definitely not appropriate. I don't think kissing on the cheeks appropriate either, but depending on the culture, it is. And so we don't shy away from that because we don't want to show disrespect there. Showing physical expression of affection in an isolated location. So obviously one-on-one situations where people can't see, at your house with somebody individually, definitely not something that's acceptable. Sitting on someone's lap, never acceptable. Again, if the kids want to do it, they're in a group setting, they want to sit on each other's lap. I still don't recommend it. I ask them, hey, let's not do that, just because it can be misconstrued, and we don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. Wrestling of any kind, that's obviously bodily contact, so we don't recommend it. It's not okay. Carrying someone on your back or shoulders. So that one is one thing that I've had some people argue about. I feel, again, we have an adult-youth relationship. Let them do it with each other, but we shouldn't partake in that kind of activity. Tickling, again, not appropriate. Massages, offering any form of physical affection that is unwanted. Touching the bottom, waist, chest, or genital areas, obviously not okay. And then making sexual contact of any kind. So unacceptable, inappropriate, definitely not, that's definitely something you want to, stay far away from. So you also have verbal interactions. So it's not always physical, you have verbal as well. So acceptable verbal interactions, positive reinforcement, highly encourage that. Jokes in general. So that's meaning something that is not inappropriate, something that's not race related, not gender related, just, a funny joke. Be careful with jokes though, because again, some people get highly offended. So it's one of those gray areas in my mind. Encouragement, always recommend encouraging the kids using positive reinforcement, and then praise. So unacceptable verbal interactions, calling someone names, not acceptable, obviously. Adults discussing sexual encounters or their personal problems with youth participants, stay away from it. It's not their business. That's something you shouldn't necessarily be sharing in public anyways, as far as I'm concerned. Adults asking youth to keep secrets of any kind. I don't care if it's a harmless secret, you don't think it's a big deal. That starts to lead into the emotional leading of youth, and that's not good. Cursing, you want to avoid cursing. Obviously, it's just not professional anyways, but it's definitely not acceptable. Discriminatory or sexual jokes, we kind of talked about that. Jokes are one of those gray areas, so be careful with there. Shaming or belittling someone, so you don't want to partake in that. Obviously, you don't want to make jokes, you don't want to poke fun, because again, it's just not going to be beneficial to anybody. Harsh language that may frighten, threaten, or humiliate youths, stay away from it. Obviously, we're not their parent, we're not there to scold them. If a action needs to be taken, disciplinary action, then do it politely. Don't use forceful tones, and make sure that they fully understand why and what's going on, and then make appropriate actions from there. Making negative remarks about a participant or their family, culture, religion, gender, identity, sexual orientation, or background, that goes without saying, just not appropriate. And then commenting on or complimenting a person's body or body development. This is something obviously you do not want to do, even if somebody grew a lot, whether they grew tall, whether they grew wide, no matter what part of their body grows, it's just stay away from it. Don't even mention it. It's not for you to mention. It can be taken the wrong way. And ultimately, that's not what we're there for. And so I hope that people aren't focusing on that. So a couple of things that obviously we got to make sure we talk about is electronic and online interactions. Communicating with participants via text, email, social media, and now Zoom or personal phone presence, it presents new challenges to keeping participants safe. Many youth serving organizations prohibit private texting or online conversations between adults and youth. They require the adult to copy another volunteer on any such communication. So that is highly recommended. If you're in a group text or you're in, something of that nature, even if you're, trying to interact with a interact student, just include multiple people so it's not a one-on-one situation. So you're kind of taking what we talked about on a in-person level. You don't want to be by yourself with anybody. Same thing with a group text or an email. Just CC as many people as possible so that it doesn't become a he said, she said thing, and to make sure that everyone stays on the up and up and they don't stray off the lines and the purpose of the email or the text. So guidelines for electronic communication with the participant: copy or include another volunteer or the participant's parent or guardian. I highly recommend a parent or guardian be included because then they know what's going on. Communicate with multiple participants in a closed group or use a website or social media page that are not visible to the public. So if you have a group setting, a group Facebook page, something of that nature, it eliminates the one-on-one side of it and then the he said, she said situation. So it's recommended. Counselors, advisors, and host parents might be allowed to exchange messages with the participant without supervision if they have the prior approval of program leadership. So that being said, I know that host parents obviously are going to need to communicate with their host with the host families and the kids that come that they're hosting, and so that may be a different situation and an approved situation versus an interact group or something like that. So what to avoid in electronic communication with participants? Some of this stuff, I know we have to say it, but hopefully it's just common sense to you guys. Harsh, coercive, threatening, intimidating, derogatory, or humiliating comments. Sexual conversations or images, please do not do that. It's amazing how many times you say that, and then nonetheless people are sending explicit pics to each other, and it's just never a good thing. And then I also put on there, always be aware of your background. So hopefully nobody here on the call has anything to worry about. Hopefully you're not checking your background picture right now, but things in your background, if you have posters, let's say you ride a Harley and there's a girl, on top of a Harley and it's in your background picture, that's obviously not okay. You want to make sure that that stuff is also clean and it's not going to offend anybody and that it's not going to be derogatory to anybody. And so that they're not offended by it. Private messages between a volunteer and a youth without prior approval. So don't, pick up the phone and start texting people. Oh, I have the list right here, the phone numbers. I'm just going to text them and check in to see how they're doing. Not recommended. It's definitely, can get you in hot water real fast. Posting pictures of youth participants on social media sites without parental consent. So a lot of the Interact clubs will have a form that they fill out saying, hey, I agree that you can use my video or you can use my picture throughout the year through our Interact page or website or whatever, but the parent actually has to sign that. The kid cannot give you permission if they're under 18. If they're over 18, then they can sign it. And I recommend you get signage from maybe the host of your classroom for your Interact or anybody that else is at the school, even adults. Make sure that you have that on file in your social media file, just so that if something happens, you have their permission and that you have your bases covered. So again, under 18, the parent has to sign it. Over 18, they can sign it themselves. And then posting inappropriate comments on pictures. So if for some reason you are following people on social media that you interact with, I highly recommend you just, if you're going to view it. But I recommend not making a comment at all. You can maybe do a like or something of that nature, but avoid any kind of emotion and or any kind of comment that could be misconstrued. So that's the electronic side of it. There's a ton of electronic stuff going on right now. There's a lot of different platforms going on. So really just, if you can limit it as much as possible, and then if you do interact, include as many people as possible, because the he said, she said situations get real sticky real fast versus no, this is a group conversation. Everybody was aware of it and it was appropriate the whole time. So if for some reason you come across inappropriate behavior, we recommend you address the first sign of inappropriate behavior right away. You can contact Rotary International. You can review the district records to determine if there's been a problem in the past. So if you say, hey, there's a person that's in Rotary, I'm not sure, things that they're doing haven't always, I don't think are following the policies and procedures. By chance, have they had any kind of allegations brought against them in the past, or have other people been concerned about them? Because we want to make sure that it's not a pattern. And then reiterate your expectations so that people know. It's good opportunity to communicate your expectations to all involved in the youth programs. Reiterate the youth protection policies and how to protect both young people and the adults. So this is something I highly recommend you talk about with your Rotaract groups, with your Interact groups, with your Early Act groups. Talk about it right off the bat. Talk about it often. Talk about it at the very beginning of the meeting. Say, this is the expectation. This is what we expect from you. You are not to do X, Y, and Z. We are not to do X, Y, and Z. Please do not engage in certain behaviors because it's not appropriate between young people and adult people. And so just if you lay it out there and you talk about it, then it's not taboo. And then it's not something, if for some reason they step out of line or you step out of line, if it's addressed, it's not as big of a deal and it's not as hard to address it because you guys have been talking about it and you've been warned about it multiple times. So if you have somebody that you think is not, following the guidelines, we recommend monitoring that person's behavior. Keep an eye on them. Maybe, have several other people, let other people know in your club or let other people know you're volunteering with, hey, I have this concern. Can you keep an eye on this person as well? Just so that we can make sure that we're not, protecting ourselves but protecting the youth. Also, it goes the other way. If you have youth that you're suspecting problems with, you want to make sure that you are watching them, that it doesn't become a problem. And if you guys sense any kind of signs of any inappropriate behavior, report it right away, and or address it with that person so it doesn't get out of line. So reporting allegations of abuse, if it comes down to that. If a situation arises and it comes down to that, we highly recommend that you report the allegations of the abuse. So all of these things can be considered part of the grooming process. Grooming is establishing an emotional connection with someone to lower their inhibitions and gain their trust with the intent to sexually abuse. All of these actions can be used to groom. Now, it could be sexual abuse, but it could also be physical abuse and harming them. So to groom or prepare a person to be harassed or abused. People with harmful intent use these actions to gain someone's trust, win their confidence, or convince the young person that they truly care about them. Oftentimes, abusers build affection and dependence to make the young person believe they're a willing participant in the abuser's inappropriate behavior. So in summary, you want to make sure you address the first signs of inappropriate behavior. Contact Rotary International if you have any questions. Review the district records to determine if there's a pattern, if you're concerned that there's a pattern. Reiterate your expectations to all involved. Monitor the person's behavior. Talk with the young person and their parents or legal guardians if something does happen and or you have a concern with the youth that's involved. And then if it comes down to it, report the allegations of the abuse to the appropriate authorities in a timely manner. And within 48 hours, you need to also notify Rotary International if something does happen. So Rudy, I think we're bumping up against time. Is that correct?
We're at the end of the hour.
Cool.
But we have some folks probably have some questions here if you want to stop sharing, if that's your last slide.
Yeah, sure.
And now Manzor, you got your hand up there. Manzor, unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. First of all, excellent presentation and very thorough and academically excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had two comments. One is that when you are pointing out to someone in your club, hey, keep an eye on so-and-so, this could be very disruptive to the entire club morale. And my suggestion would be that you meet with the person individually right away, in private, in confidence, and say, this is what I'm observing. Can you help me understand? Now, it's very possible that that person may have a different relationship with a particular person. But if you put them on notice, say, hey, this may be true, but nevertheless, it may not be perceived in your favor by others. And I think you could probably nip the bud right there. And because people love to talk and gossip, and most of the time it may or may not be true. And so it's maybe a perception. So that's one comment I would make. It'll be very prudent for us to safeguard not only our children, but also our adults. And so both ways.
Very true.
The second comment, I think one problem with getting old is you tend to forget things. And I can't remember what was the second one. Anyway, the second comment I had was that if someone is fingerprinted once, it does not mean that they will be safe as long as they are with us within our district. In my company, I cannot hire anyone unless they have had a DOJ checkup, a live scan and all that. So, but if they are with somebody else, they were not with me, but they were 6 months or older checkup, my company requires that they go through again. If they might say, well, I worked for so-and-so, even if it's the same business and they had a live scan, I'm still going to require that they go ahead and redo it, because anything could happen within 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But if they are only with our department, they have not been outside, then I think that we may be safe. Thank you.
Dave Johnson, unmute yourself.
Yes, one of the things we had, not on youth protection, but we had another situation where somebody emailed to somebody about something else and it happened to get into a group and it happened to get into out. And it became a very good problem. So I think it's probably a good idea. Keep this off email, off of Messenger, et cetera, and maybe make a phone call. One of those archaic ways just to talk to one person at a time. That's it.
I do. I definitely can see that side of it. I would recommend at least having it documented somewhere in a file, maybe with the president or with your youth protection person or whatever it's regarding. Just so you have, let's say, for instance, you had a conversation with them. Just if somebody made a summary of the conversation you had with them, and then it was documented, because like Mansoor made a good point, people forget what they say, or people may forget what was discussed. And so at least, even if for yourself, I would recommend if you had a phone conversation with somebody to document it and then file it so that you have it, so you can reference it later if it be.
Good point.
Yeah. Any other questions for Matt?
And
Oh,
again, if you guys have any questions or want any forums or are curious about policies that other clubs have had or that RI has, please feel free to reach out to me. I want to make sure that everyone feels as comfortable as possible working with the youth, but you want to make sure that, again, they're protected, but we're also protected, and the Rotary name is protected. And one thing we didn't discuss, but if it gets into a situation where media gets involved, I highly recommend that you make one person the point person that's going to talk about the situation, and that person gets coached by RI before they make any comments or any statements to either a newspaper or an article, blog article, or any kind of media.
Yeah, Dan, Dan, you get your hand up there? Where'd he go?
Sorry.
Here he is.
Not really a question, just a couple of observation and comments. First of all, Matt, excellent presentation. I think if any of us in this room run into a situation with a youth program, you have an excellent resource right here.
Thank you.
I really don't know that, and I will just speak for myself personally. They put us through quite a bit of training on youth protection. And I've listened to, I don't know, several presentations during my zone training. Matt, I'm just going to tell you, you ought to teach the class. It was very thorough. And the only thing I would add is what was added at the end about the media. That's a key point that they talk about. So if you run into those situations, the point person, contact your youth protection officer, who should be contacting the district governor.
Yeah.
But with that being said, excellent thing. The only other thing that I would advise is that we were having some discussion about having one-on-one conversations with people if you witness something. If that person happens to be a person of the opposite sex, you're going to want to bring a person with you. So, for example, if I'm having a conversation with Marilyn because I see something that Marilyn might be doing inappropriately, it's better to have another person with you when you're having those conversations on one-off, so that we avoid a he said, she said thing and potentially a discriminatory thing of, the governor said this, or, whoever, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the only other piece of advice. And further, because of the severity of this and because of the responsibility that I have, this is something that I won't take lightly. I wouldn't anyway, but I'm in Rotary for two reasons, and I've said this many times in other presentations: service and youth. So protecting our youth is the utmost importance, one of the utmost important things to me. We have great youth programs in our district. We have an awesome Interact presence. We have a great RILA program, a great Pride program. I think that it would be just a disaster, a travesty, if we hit the media about how District 5330 had this happen inside their programs. So we've been pretty good, and our training has been good, and we've had good, responsible people running those programs. And I just can't thank you all enough for doing what you do to make sure that our youth is protected. It's very important to me, and it's very important to the youth, obviously, and it's very important for the grace and the well-being of our district. So, Matt, thank you again for putting on such an excellent presentation. I learned something every time I hear it, and it's about at least the third time I've heard your presentation. So, congratulations. Yeah. Awesome job.
He's getting better with age, so it's.
I know. His beard's getting longer.
Yeah, his beard's getting longer.
He's getting more wisdom with that beard. Yes.
I hope that was an acceptable joke about your beard, man. So.
Oh, look at Keenan though. Keenan's got it going on too. I think Matt's got you in length. Keenan's got you in age.
Yeah. I resemble the age thing, so we'll do it.
Yeah.
Oh, man, Zuri, you have another question?
I have just one question for Governor Dan and for also for Matt. During my governorship, one of our districts, not our district, but another, had a disaster, major disaster. And so they asked all of us governors, did we have a disaster plan in place for any kind of fiasco? And in this particular case, the media did get hold of the story, and somebody who loved to be in front of the media made some comments, and all of a sudden it was like a floodgate and very embarrassing for their district. So I was just going to ask, do we have an emergency plan, how to handle it, the protocols? I know that you mentioned RI should be consulted, definitely, but we should have a protocol as to if something happens, who's first, who's next, and what do we say, what we should not say. Thank you.
Well, the answer to that is yes. And the bottom line on it is in the industry that I work in, I don't get much media attention, but the reality is that we're not speaking to the media. So if the media wants to speak to us about an incident regarding the youth, they're not going to get a comment, because the standard operating answer to that is that we'll release a statement when it's time, and we're not going to do interviews. Okay, so we're not going to make the story. That fuels rumors, it fuels perception. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. That's why I suggested if you have an incident that's going on with your youth and you're not quite sure what to do, contact Matt.
That's it.
Matt knows those policies inside and out. He is very well informed, as you can tell from his presentation. And we don't want to put our foot in our mouth. And when we end up contacting RI, if it's severe enough that RI is going to get involved with it or thinks that we need to get involved with it, guess what we'll get? Legal representation. And they'll be doing the talking. So it really is a very well thought out plan. But I would encourage you all to practice safely, listen to the advice that Matt gave you, knowing what's appropriate and inappropriate is going to keep you out of trouble 99% of the time. Okay. So
Yeah.
I hope that answers everything.
Yeah, if I can just add to that a little bit. Dan's 100% right, but what we need to do, and Mansour has a very good point, is we need to make sure that we get this information down to the club level, that the club doesn't speak out of turn. The club doesn't talk to their local paper. The club doesn't post anything on their social media. They cannot bring any attention to it, and or anything can be misconstrued. So if anything does happen, like Dan said, the district and or RI will release a statement and or will be coached on what to say and have the proper representation, and we will have a plan in place with that specific incident through the proper representation. But at the club level, clubs need to know they're not supposed to take it on themselves. They're not supposed to be their own, spokesperson, be their own, person in the community to speak up about it. It needs to be represented as a whole through the district, because each club is part of the district. And so that each club needs to know, hey, we have policies and procedures in place, and part of the policy and procedure is to take it from the top down and not let the individual club handle it.
Thank you, Matt.
Hopefully we don't have to go down that road.
Exactly.
That'd be a good idea.
Okay.
Awesome. So if anybody has any
Matt, for all
questions,
you're doing.
feel free to call me. Yes, absolutely. You're welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Very
Why not?
detailed.
Jimmy, you still haven't called me.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh.